Welcome, Jake from Flank to the Interstella podcast. I'm really excited to have a chat to you today. I know it's been a long time coming, even though we do chat pretty regularly. So maybe just for the benefit of the audience, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Of course. Good to be here, Tice. Good to see you. So I'm Jake. I'm one of the co-founders and COO at Flank. And what we do, what we're solving for, is that clearly today, a lot of legal work in-house is done by very, very expensive, highly trained resources. And the work itself is pretty routine. So we solve for that by deploying fully autonomous agents. And we've got a pretty big view on how legal services and legal vendors might disrupt in-house even more than just delivering autonomous agents that I'm sure we'll get into, Tice. And we founded a few years ago now, initially as LegalOS, selling to law firms themselves. And we're now working exclusively with large in-house teams at enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've been a huge fan of Flank since day one. Like, I think pretty much since the first time we met, kind of been diving reasonably deep. But what's something about Flank that you think that even still today, people don't fully understand?
I think okay, so the whole value proposition of Flanks is that the work gets done. So when we look at some of the routine work in-house, we have document review, doc gen. These are point solution verticals that have existed for a long time. So people have preconceived notions about what a doc review tool will do. And a lot of the other legal intelligence platforms on the market do similar kinds of work. They have review, they have whatever. But what Flank is not is another tool for the legal team to use to better do their NDA review or their MSA review or their drafting of their franchise agreements. Instead, Flank picks the work up from the business like an ALSP would. It figures out exactly what is required. So it will gather context from Salesforce and other systems. It will do the work entirely end to end, meaning getting all of the input from the various team members that are required as required, running reviews against a playbook, checking its own work, etc., and then delivering it back to the business, obviously with a check from the legal team if it's desired. That idea of full autonomy, I still don't think is totally landing.
Yeah, and I think, obviously there's a big buzz about agentic AI, and then there's the other tools essentially who have launched, inverted commas, agents, etc. But I've kind of, I think you and I have chatted over this for many times in the past, right? In terms of that definition of tool agnostic versus in-tool, etc. So do you kind of still see that as maybe not a misconception, but maybe a confusion amongst the clients or the customers in terms of this, and kind of all branded around the hype of, first of all, it was generative AI, now it's agentic AI. And I guess, how do you explain that? I think you kind of just did it a little bit, but, obviously then comparing it to the tools themselves also go out and say that they've got agents kind of working within their own tools, etc. Do you find there's a confusion there?
So I think you're touching upon something already, which is this idea of a tool. So I'm going to rewind a bit and say where maybe we were not so clear in our messaging in the previous years, which was we were very early with building agents and understanding of an agent and how we articulated what an agent was and how it differed from traditional AI, like generative AI version 1. The way it differed was this degree of autonomy that it had. This is what we tried to articulate. So we said agents, unlike just a chatbot, an agent can go away and do stuff. It can do the work. It can do stuff end to end. This became confusing for people because a lot of tools were releasing agents and agentic AI within their products that were used by lawyers. So they were just way better tools that did a lot more. And maybe they went away and did work for 10, 15 minutes. So it looks very agentic, and it is agentic, but it still relies upon an expert user to use the tool. So it's an agent within a tool. That's how we used to talk about Flank agents. And I think that's where some of the ambiguity slipped in. Now, how we describe it today, which is landing a lot more clearly, and you touched upon, is you have tools, software tools that are used by lawyers. You obviously don't want, or you probably don't want your commercial team and your salespeople using some kind of Word plugin to draft MSAs without your oversight. So you have tools, software tools that are used by legal practitioners. And then you have services which are engaged by legal practitioners. So if you have a service, you're buying an outcome. You're saying, here are all of my MSAs. The volume's crazy. We have a pretty simple playbook. Can you take this? Delivery center, can you take it and deal with it? That's a service. On the other side, you have the tool version of that where you say, okay, I've got 8 lawyers. Our MSAs are taking a long time. I'm going to give those lawyers some Word plugin so they move incrementally faster. So the difference and where we position ourselves is this dichotomy between software and services, and we put ourselves on the services side. Now, this now creates a new challenge, which a lot of other, I think, new startups are going to be also facing a similar challenge, which is companies procuring software and engaging services have no pre-existing model for how to engage a service that looks like software. So they have a thing that does the work, and it plugs into their Outlook, plugs into their Salesforce, picks up work, does the work, puts it on their desk and says, I've done the work, check it. You sign it off, it goes back to the business. But mentally procuring that tool, procuring that service, it looks like a software tool. The vendor selling it is a software vendor. So to tap into service spend or to think about procuring it in a way that is more like a service than software is very difficult. So it's not even a new category. It's actually a straddling category that has many of the qualities of software. So it's on demand, it's got incredible SLAs, it's got predictable pricing with some of the more autonomous end-to-end outcome-driven aspects that you typically associate with a service.
Yeah.
That's something that the market is still figuring out and how to buy that.
Yeah, I know. And you and I have been chatting about this for nearly 8 months or something, or 9 months, 10 months, etc. in terms of this kind of, how do we sell it? How do we educate the buyers of it? How do we disrupt the market in terms of that, which I think is incredibly exciting, but sometimes hard when you're kind of first to market in these areas. Maybe just kind of flipping it a little bit, maybe what's the hardest personal trade-off you think you've had building Flank that people don't see?
That's an enormous one.
Yeah.
So, guys, you promised me tears before we press record.
Real talk.
I don't know if you'll get tears, but I wouldn't be surprised. So let me talk through what immediately comes up, and then maybe another level will kick in as you interrogate me. The first thing that came up is opportunity cost. We're in a really unique period in time right now with technology where those people who love to build can build very, very quickly and can potentially build multi-million-dollar revenue businesses within 3 to 6 months. And I'm observing friends and acquaintances and colleagues, former colleagues, do that kind of thing. And my 0 to 1 builder gets quite anxious and frustrated because I want to move at that pace that you can move at when you're at 0 again. I think for me, I've had to really so commit and believe in the agentic service vision that we have in order to commit my prime years of building to legal AI, which, it's like growing very fast and everything else, but there are potentially more exciting areas than legal.
Yeah.
To commit to legal AI when I could be building something on my own, I could be doing something entirely on my own. And what is required today, that leads me on to like the personal sacrifice, which is what is required today to grow a business that is competing against the likes of Harvey and Lagora. We're not
Yeah.
competing level, but we're competing against the likes of them in deals. All of the other kids who are coming in building from zero and getting YC funding, what it requires, the sacrifice required to keep up with them it's insane. As in, it really is truly insane. You're probably seeing this yourself, Tice, with building out Stella, that you can't work 9 to 5 because there's so much. It's not just that you have to do more, but there's so many levers you can now pull due to all the agentic AI at our fingertips that if I want to launch a campaign, an outbound campaign or a marketing campaign, or if I want to build a new part of the product, I can do it all. I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
do it
yeah,
myself.
exactly.
So if I'm not doing it and I'm sitting at 7 p.m. playing F1 on my PlayStation, instead of building it, and it's something I want to do, I'm excited to do it. And yet at the same time, I fall asleep late at night, having just logged off from Claude Code, and I'm dreaming about prompting Claude Code.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's really, really interesting. I think I have a couple of questions that kind of followed up from that one, which is like, I think you're kind of, you touched on legal is one area, and I've known you to kind of, we've talked about stocks and we've talked about music and things like that. And I think you're kind of operating at the kind of the intersection of law and AI and things like that, that you're very passionate about other things. Which of those most feels like you, and which is, you think, a role you've learned to play?
Wow. Wow. That is a big question. And again, I have there are immediate things that bubble up. Like, what is the most me? I could immediately say anything involving like 0 to 1 creation, whether that's within my music, whether that's within AI, like a side project, whether it's Flank, whatever, that definitely feels very true to me. And doing that on my own is something uniquely exciting, that there's no one holding your hand when you're starting a song, for example, and you have no idea what you do. You sit down at a piano and you just start playing some notes and you have
Yeah.
no idea if it's going to come or if it's going to be any good. And the same with opening up Claude Code or whatever. But the more interesting part of your question for me is this: where have I learned to do that? Because my experience over the last decade of doing legal AI, legal tech, decision AI, decision automation toward generative AI has been that I've learned particular roles so gradually that I've barely noticed. And I've learned very easily to convince myself this is my thing, that I love and that I'm in. And a narrative I tell myself is I'm an AI founder. I love pioneering. I love building. I love new technologies, and I want to disrupt an enormous, ancient, traditional industry like legal. But if you'd asked my 23-year-old self that, he would probably have laughed at you. So I've
Yeah.
certainly learned that, which doesn't necessarily make it any less true, because I probably also learned that I love to write music. I don't know.
Did you ever have a moment where you thought, wait a sec, this might not work? And what did you do in that 24-hour period afterwards, if you
I
did?
mean, like every Monday morning.
Yeah, which I think is a thing a little bit, right? As we're both entrepreneurs and founders, and I always feel like you're on this precipice of amazing success, but also devastating failure, and you're always on that edge. But you keep plodding along no matter what, and you definitely you have times where you change direction or change strategy and things like that. But like being on that edge is incredibly stressful. And how do you manage that?
I think so I frame a lot of my decision making. It feels very much like in sport, where you have, for example, in tennis, you can just hit the ball back and forth with your opponent. I'm bad at tennis, but you can hit it back and forth with your opponent, or you can go for one hand backhand winner down the line and try and hit the line. And the margin for error is microscopic if you go for that shot, but the potential returns are enormous.
Mhm.
So the way I frame building in the AI era is a little bit like it's a series of very aggressive moonshots with the assumption that most will not pay off. And that's fine because you only need one to pay off. But if you don't take moonshots, if you take roof shots, or if you're just hitting it back and forth with your opponent, you might get to 3 to 5 million in annual recurring revenue that's quite stable. And that will be a ceiling for you, or 10 million. It would be a ceiling. And I would rather be sitting at like 0, taking moonshots until we unlock something that could be the $100 million business, revenue business. So that gives me peace of mind because that's also how I handle opportunity cost. Because if I think about what I could be doing, if I'm just grinding away on something, getting to like 1 million, 2 million, 3 million revenue, and I'm just competing in a red ocean building the same product as everyone else, and I know that there's no greater thing at stake, then I'm burning time on something that could be so much bigger in another domain. Again, be it music, be it whatever other AI product I might build or whatever in my life. So yeah, moonshot after moonshot then also helps me handle failure because it's like, oh, well, the moonshot didn't work. The moonshot's not meant to work. Another moonshot didn't work. It's not meant to work. And then over time, I do think these moonshots accumulate if you do them frequently enough because they're also generating a lot of feedback. And then there's learning. And then I'm a way better moonshot maker now than I was like 12 months ago.
Yeah.
And it builds from there.
Yeah. I think that's, I love the moonshot analogy, by the way, in terms of Interstella and things like that, and to the moon, which is one of our mottos. What about, because I know you and Lily live in Berlin, and I've lived there too. Amazing city. It's creative. It's chaotic. It's anti-corporate. How has living there, do you think, shaped building a Flank?
So I think maybe let me start with the positives, which are there's a lot of talk about Berlin being a tech city. I don't perceive it as being a tech city at all. There are some events that happen. There's some cool companies building in Berlin, but it's not got the energy of a San Francisco or a Paris or a London in any way. You're not bumping into people building left, right, and center. And it actually is, you have to go out of your way to engage with that kind of community, to the extent that Google tried to launch a new campus and there were strikes against it, or there were protests against it, and they ended up having to give the campus away to a nonprofit. But the positives are, because of that, I have felt quite distant from the building that's happening in SF, and I've felt less immediate product pressure to just go into this mode of like shad CN UI, pump out a feature every 3 days. Now they're doing this. Now they've got this feature, pump it out. And I feel therefore less like, I think red oceans have a gravity because there's a lot of money being pumped into it and there's established market patterns, and it's easy to get sucked into that. And sometimes it's the right thing to do. But for us, it's been easy to observe that and in my opinion, take bigger bets. And it also feels somewhat like, maybe this is not true, and maybe our investors, hopefully they won't see this, but they would disagree with this. But it feels like the eye of Sauron of investors is not so much on Berlin, even if it's your own investors, that they're kind of looking at SF, they're seeing what's happening there, and you can kind of head down, knuckle down, build something big, and then tap them on the shoulder and say, look where I've gotten to, look at our customers, look at what we've rolled out at enterprise, look at what our product can do now. I think that can be a benefit depending on the kind of thing you're building. But a challenge is that I have found I've had to really construct for myself a motivation to be a tech founder and to live that life, because I don't have role models everywhere. I don't have peers who are doing this, who are working like 8 till 10 every day. Not that I'm doing that every day, but like there are plenty of days where I'm doing that recently. And therefore I have to just sit in my apartment where I am now, and I have to tell myself, okay, I'm a tech founder. We have this stuff we have to achieve. We're also a hybrid company, so half of our team are entirely remote, and it requires more intrinsic motivation, which I think can be a lot harder to get, especially.
But do you think Yeah, do you think if you built it in London or New York or San Fran, it would have been a very, very different company? And do you think that Berlin is part of your product DNA, or is that just a personal reflection in terms of that pressure you're feeling?
That's a really great question. I don't know. I definitely think it's very personal. I've got a very particular relationship to Berlin. And I do think products coming out of Silicon Valley have a very particular quality to them. Not necessarily better, but they have there's much more of a playbook.
Yeah.
There's much less of that in Berlin. So I think there are challenges in Berlin that let me put it that way. I think there are challenges in Berlin for companies founding in Berlin that don't exist in London, Paris, and SF, and that sometimes overcoming them can shape the product in positive ways because they're challenges that you kind of have to bake into the product. How do you reach a particular audience when you're a random GmbH based in Berlin and American companies are looking at you and thinking, a German legal AI company? What? Like, why would I, who even are they and why would I work with them? So
Yeah.
you sometimes have to go above and beyond and develop marketing strategies and partnerships and aspects of your product that are more differentiated that potentially force the product to be better by whatever measure we're gauging that quality.
Yeah, I want to chat a bit more about AI, but before we do that, I just want to chat maybe one little bit more about music. So, I know you're playing the after party at Interstella, which I'm super excited. I got a chance to listen to your pipes when we were at the beach house last year, which was amazing. I think we were all kind of speechless, and it definitely was a great little impromptu jam. What about if I listen to your tracks? What would I learn about you that I don't think we would get from this conversation?
That I probably spend most of my time not thinking about technology and AI. That I would say most of my music is about my own weaknesses, I suppose, primarily, which is not something I bring into my role as a founder, and I don't think is necessarily invited. So I guess that vulnerability is probably the number one thing that would come
So,
across.
when you're making music, are you trying to escape from your work, or are you trying to process it?
No. So when I'm trying, I would just get an urge like normally. So I'm primarily a vocalist. That's like, I'm really bad. I'm a really bad instrument, not really bad. I can play, but I'm not a virtuoso instrumentalist on any instrument whatsoever. Even though I've played instruments for a long time, but I'm primarily a singer. And when I hear music, it's like an urge to sing, like I'm desperate to sing. And I think because when I grew up, my mum just would be walking around the house singing all day, every day. And so I have this in me where I just need to sing. And everyone who spends a lot of time with me is like, feels like they're in a musical because I'm just constantly at it. So I'll be sitting there, I'll have music on, maybe I'm working and I'll need to sing and I'll literally have to go and sit at the piano and just start singing. And then there's normally just like some particular thing that I think, oh, I could do a good version of that. I could imitate that a little bit. And then I'll like just start writing. So it's very, I would say it's not an escape. It's more like, yeah, it all weaves together. It's one of the things in my day that I need alongside deep work and exercise and good coffee and singing. Like they're all just things that require like daily requirements, I would say.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
feel
no, that's
myself
awesome.
when I do it.
No, I completely feel exactly the same way. I think we're creatures of habit a little bit, right? Like I have to have coffee. I have to, listen to a new record I haven't listened to before. I've got to obviously, work hard with the team and do all those things and do some exercise as well. And if I don't do those things, something's out of place and I don't feel right. All right, so let's maybe go back to a little bit more conversations around AI and things like that. So, obviously you've seen Claude kind of heading into the space. If OpenAI and Google start to kind of go directly into the legal space and not necessarily just Flank as well, like what's your move?
So he's a new CTO now, Martin, former head of engineering, is just being promoted. Our CTO spent some time looking at managed agents and the Word plugin, and then he wrote up a report for me. He came
This
to
is
me
from Claude?
from Claude, both from Anthropic. So the Claude Word plugin and then Anthropic's managed agents, which run for longer and can do more work and use more inference and everything else. And then he wrote up a report and he came to me. Now, before writing up the report, he was on edge going, these are real potentially disruptive new features from Claude that disrupt our own business model and everything else. Then he finished writing the report. He came to me and he gave it to me and he was like, look, ultimately, if we're delivering agentic services, then our agents and any partner who is supervising and working with us to deliver our services will want the best tools available. And the more Anthropic ship really high quality models and great word plugins and everything else, the more agents and anyone supervising and working with us to deliver a service, the more empowered they are to deliver better outcomes. So in a way, we are a little bit anti-fragile, I believe, to domain model providers and foundation model providers shipping, because everything they ship we can use. Already now, for one client in particular who I'm thinking of, we have a supervisory relationship with a law firm, and those supervisors who are supervising our agents are receiving. So our agents pick up the request from a large financial services organization. They do all of the review work up front. So they look at the playbook, they look at what is standard, what's not standard, they write up a report, they check their own work, and then they propose what red lines should be applied to the document. But they don't even apply the red lines. Instead, the supervisor has a single CTA they click, which is copy suggested red lines. And then they load up Word with Claude and they paste that prompt in. And basically it's the handoff from part of one component of our agentic system to another, which is the human who's a component in that system. And they into the Claude Word plugin. The Claude Word plugin doesn't do any thinking. It just goes, executes all the red lines. It's a perfect version of the doc now, because if you're using a plugin for the actual execution of red lines, then the accuracy is close to 100%. And then they output it and then they send it back to our agent, and that agent picks it up and goes back to the business. So my feeling, what is my move? What would my move be? I want to go deeper and deeper and deeper into delivering outcomes and delivering a service. And the better models get and the more features that come out of Anthropic, the more urgency I feel in doing that. So we've been making some strides towards that in the last few weeks and months, but I want to make increasingly massive strides there.
So with that, then with your hypothesis, because I would kind of almost describe you guys as a more vertical service-driven AI company versus a horizontal. And so do you think the horizontal platforms are more at risk, or do you think there's still a place for those as well? And do you think we're heading towards more vertical AI companies winning more? Or do you think horizontal companies will eat everything?
This is the crux question. This is like the big question.
Yeah.
And a whistle stop tour of my thesis is like, you have tools and you have services. We established that dichotomy earlier. And services are safe because they can use all of the amazing research coming out of Anthropic. So assuming services are safe, we can also discuss that later because there's a lot of cool things you can do with services today. Assuming that's safe, and then you look at the tools and they're increasingly horizontal. Why are they increasingly horizontal? Because it's so cheap to build new features. But that also means it's so cheap to build new features, right? So on the one hand, it can appear as this space is maturing and consolidating, this tooling space for legal teams, let's call it the legal intelligence platform, which I think is roughly the category now. As legal intelligence platforms are very new, every new feature is something that is used to capture a new customer and to shout about on LinkedIn and can seem very exciting. But they're only ever one tiny click ahead, if that, of the foundation model providers. So we already see now Claude Cowork can do everything that, I won't name a specific company, but that one of these more mid-market legal intelligence platforms can do. I would not include Harvey in this, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why that we can touch later. But your mid-market legal intelligence platform, who's spending most of their money anyway on marketing and sales, not on engineering, which is fine, but they are now essentially directly competing with Claude Cowork because Claude Cowork can do all of that stuff, and it has the Word plugin, and it plugs into all your other tools via MCP and whatever. My feeling is that if you're building software, if you're building a tool today, you are constantly having to outrun Claude Cowork. But legal teams have a budget for software. A lot of their CLM implementation, in some cases, their 3-year contracts are coming to a close. New budget is being opened up for AI tools. So there's a real new market, essentially, opportunity for legal intelligence platforms, a lot of which has already been taken, a lot of ground's taken. There's still a lot remaining. Legal teams are not evaluating, that I'm observing, you might be seeing something different on the Stella side. They're not yet educated enough to evaluate Claude Cowork versus insert name of legal intelligence platform here. They're just not educated enough to do that yet. Not a critique of them, but it's just the market's moving so quickly. So not educated to do that. Therefore, they are asking people, who are the big legal intelligence platforms? They're asking the legal ops advisory firms. They're asking the big four. They're looking at Forrester and Gartner for guidance. They're looking at LinkedIn, whatever. They're doing their Google search, and they're seeing between 5 and 15 names of legal intelligence platforms. And then they're weighing them up in a feature battle against one another and demo battle and whatever, and it's a bake-off. They might do an RFP, whatever, and then they choose one or the other. Now, that's my belief. My thesis is that this is just a transitionary period between no AI and platform AI, enterprise platform AI. Enterprise platform AI, my assumption is, will be owned by one model provider. And it will be the new execution layer, either on top of or in place of Microsoft 365. So my assumption is we're going to see something like Claude Cowork becoming the AI execution layer across the whole of an enterprise. And you might still have MS 365 underneath it as your system of record, and you'll have your tools in there. But all the work, the first thing you'll do in the morning when you do work is you'll boot up Claude Cowork, and you'll say what you need to do, and it will check your to-dos and your emails and whatever. If that's the case, much like Microsoft didn't need to allow anyone to compete with them in the word processor game or in the presentation game or in the spreadsheet game, Claude Cowork is not going to need to have anyone competing with them in the vertical function game. All of the vertical functions, all of the white collar vertical functions of accounting, legal, sales, whatever, all of this stuff now the software side of it can very easily be built and automated within a month or two. So therefore, my ultimate assumption is that there will be a period where there's a lot of these exciting legal intelligence platforms on the market. At some point, the market will become overly educated on that, and there just won't be room for them. There might be room for people like Legora and Harvey who can go much more deeply vertical, which you touched upon. They are going to be so well funded it's their mandate based on their valuations currently that they have to seize a lot more ground. So where are they going to get that from? They'll probably deliver some degree of service. They'll probably go into adjacent verticals like compliance. And then they need to go really deeply vertical into them and serve up proprietary knowledge, proprietary expertise, proprietary tooling, all of this kind of stuff that is like really mining the depths of it. These thin horizontal platforms. I mean, I built one myself a few weeks ago. I've got a repo for it. It is almost identical to one of the leading legal intelligence platforms. Even, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. I need to decide if I edit this out or not. But I even was able to use that legal intelligence platform and extract the system prompt from it. So I could even put in the system prompt if I wanted to for all of the tools they had into this app that I built, and I built it over a weekend. So the says everything. That was a long answer because it's a thesis, but
no. It's a weird thing, you know. Like I feel, you know, obviously we live in a little bit of a bubble. I think I was chatting to we're doing some changes to Stella at the moment, and we engaged a law firm of which has the biggest AI stack, according to them, of any law firm globally. And I was amazed when I got the contract back because it was, I don't think the person had used any, I know they didn't use any AI. And when I questioned it, she said that she took it from a template, and the template it had even references to send a fax to terminate the contract. And then when I challenged, I said, did you use AI? And she said, no, because then I'd have to check the work that the AI did. Meanwhile, she spent, I think, you know, something ridiculous like 45 hours on this contract, where she pulled from a template, etc. So it kind of made me think of, you know, I'm just all day, every day talking to everyone about AI, implementing AI, you know, researching AI, playing with AI, building in AI, etc. And I was kind of thinking, you know, what do you think humans will refuse to give up to AI, even if it's objectively better?
I think the question differs depending on the domain we're looking at. I mean,
I guess related to legal, you know?
Yeah, because that's within the legal domain. And then I would also split the legal domain multiple times, but like in a simple way, I'd split it between law firms and in-house. So someone takes 45 minutes to draft a document from a template. If they're billing even a portion of those hours, then why would they give that up? They're only going to give it up when their panel of the enterprise's panel of law firms come in with their pricing for the year, and they update and they say, instead of giving our usual 5% increase, it's a decrease this year by 20%. And all the other law firms look and they're like, what? How are you giving that 20% decrease? And then that disruption happens. So it's not really the question you're asking, but I want to touch upon that anyway. So the question you're asking is, what are humans going to be willing to give up versus
I guess, like, you know, where do you think, you know, taste, intuition, creativity still beats the models today, and potentially will still need you know, just humans just won't give it up, you know, like, and you know, it feels like, you know, I was in a leadership group the other day, and I've got this. I'm going to steal the quote from the guy from the Milwaukee Bucks, and he said, like, you just can't get a haircut in person. Like, you have to get a haircut in person. Sorry, like, you know, you can't get a haircut, you know, without being there. And I still think there's some things, you know, that still requires humans. So, in your mind, what are they?
I think liability, like not legal liability, but liability from the sense of responsibility and who do I feel accountable to? I think that needs to remain human. I think that's a major alignment question across multiple domains. Looking at legal, and then I'll touch upon military, but in legal, whether or not a lawyer is exercising judgment, to me, is secondary to whether or not a lawyer is taking responsibility for whatever it is going back to a client. Because there's a model for this already, and it's called I'm a partner and I've got loads of juniors working for me. Now, who ultimately takes responsibility and says, yes, that was my junior who made the mistake and I should have checked their work or whatever? It's the partner. And that model can continue and it can scale as we introduce agentic AI. There's a whole different topic about if we have fully AI enabled and empowered agentic services and whatever, and that can be cool. But just in the traditional law firm model, my sense is that that is the thing, not only that humans are going to be unwilling to give up, but that they should not be giving up. Everything else, I think, is up for grabs. And I say that because my background is in design. It's how I got into tech. Is originally I was a designer and not a very good designer. Certainly not a very good graphic designer. But that was my way in, and I was doing design, and I didn't develop competency as a raw designer, but I developed a lot of taste, and then I've leveraged that throughout my career to do the product work. And I used to think my taste is nothing can replace it. In fact, I thought not even a human could replace it. If someone else in the team was saying it's good, I'm like, double check it with me.
Yeah.
And I've just in the last few weeks reached a point where we use various different tools to generate collateral, marketing, output, whatever. And I'm like, whatever, I don't need to see it. It's fine. My sense is if I'm super arrogant about my taste with design, if I'm willing to let go of that, then even lawyers are going to be willing to let go of a lot of what they have previously perceived as human judgment, which I think is often like fuzzy judgment. And just a technical view on this is that Opus 4.7 that was released a few days ago, on Friday, I think, Opus 4.7, no, Thursday, has the ability now to identify when it thinks human judgment is table stakes. So if you try and get Opus 4.7 to prep you for a podcast like this, and you say, hey, here's the topic we're going to be covering. This is the person I'm doing it with. This is what I want to cover. Opus 4.7 will say, okay, here are some notes for you. But I really don't think I should be making decisions about your position that you're taking in this podcast. I really don't think I should be making decisions about how you navigate this particularly sensitive, challenging topic. What are your views on it? And it will then load up like a questionnaire for me where I have to give my views on it. Initially, that frustrated me. And now I see it as like this critical point of AI alignment, like models being aware of where human judgment is needed, hopefully will prevent crazy use cases like autonomous target execution, which we're seeing in the military.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast recently with the founder of NVIDIA, and he was obviously asking about the doomsday AI question, right? Like, are we done, et cetera, and things like that. And I think he made a very interesting point, which was one of the very first use cases for AI was in radiology, where they were able to detect, like you go and get a radiology exam, and then they could, I guess, predict your illness or work out what's going wrong, etc. And I think at the time the use case was like, radiologists will be, you won't need them in 3 to 5 years because the AI will be able to do it all for you, and etc. And actually the opposite happened. There's more radiologists than there ever have been as a result, because they can do more tests, they can analyze the results quicker, and they can help more people essentially. And it's cheaper, faster, more efficient. And his kind of hypothesis was, you can use AI to automate tasks, and maybe you can apply judgment, but it doesn't kind of fundamentally put at risk the purpose of a job. And he actually talks about lawyers as well. Like he was saying that, like, look, people go to lawyers to solve really complex problems. Yes, there's legal tasks that AI can make more efficient and make you go faster, quicker, etc. But fundamentally, the purpose of being a lawyer is to solve a problem. And he doesn't think that AI will solve the purpose, but he said, like, obviously, If you're, highly admin, high volume, simple task orientated lawyer, then you are definitely at risk. Would you say that's correct, or do you disagree?
So an important caveat, obviously, is that Jensen is selling compute in a
Computer
way,
chips, obviously. Yeah. I
and
get that. Yeah.
he doesn't want to. He doesn't want this. I think. So I heard the same. I believe this was on Dwarkesh, and I think I buy it. And I think there's two pressures that come at once. One that's more noticeable, or both that I think are not so noticeable. One more than the other, though. So in the case of the radiologists, right? Like, I don't think until that process had a high degree of automation, anyone realized the extent to which there was such an immense bottleneck. And I think obviously you know that if you're awaiting a scan for cancer, you then feel it, especially if it's maybe not so urgent, but it's still kind of urgent. And then you're waiting weeks for something that is like, isn't this urgent?
Yeah.
It's just a slight tangent, but my brother-in-law is a cardiologist consultant and he specializes in cardiac MRI. And he has just managed to make his trust one of the only trusts in the UK that has the same day reporting on cardiac MRI. But one of the critical points, and this touches e-discovery randomly, but one of the critical points is that when you're using automation of something like cardiac MRI or radiology for cancer scans, is that you can identify really, really, really early where you might need to double click. So you can identify within seconds. You could do 1,000 scans and you could identify within seconds where there are 10 that definitely immediately need your attention and where you actually need a turnaround within 2 hours because that person maybe needs surgery the next day. And then you might still need a doctor to spend like 2 or 3 days later to then look at it in more detail or whatever it might be. Much like in e-discovery, if you're automating an e-discovery process or a lot of it and doing that in parallel to humans, is that you might surface something within the first hour that is critical to a case that you might only otherwise have surfaced 27 days later. And that's not to say you wouldn't still do the 30 days worth of e-discovery, but you're able upfront to surface it. So the two forces that I perceive are two aspects of automation that I perceive are like, one, the bottleneck in these domains and for these tasks is so much greater than we appreciate. I think with legal, the extent of that legal bottleneck, you could you could launch 100 agentic legal service firms tomorrow and you'd need 100 more and 1,000 more and 10,000 more and you'd still have a backlog. So the size of the bottleneck, I think, is always larger. And I think that is protective of jobs because the faster you then move through a backlog, the greater that backlog, the more willing someone is to come into the A&E department if it's going to take them 5 minutes to be seen, not 5 hours to be seen, which is one example. So that's one of the forces. And then the other is the thing that I think you also touched upon that you derived from what Jensen's saying, which is Jensen says, we now have a shortage of radiologists. Like you always need more. And that is because of the growing backlog and because the nature of the role is changing. I think you put it perfectly. I couldn't put it any better, which is there's a particular role that a given profession owns. There's a particular responsibility to deliver justice in the case of a judge or whatever it is, an outcome particularly that they're owning. And that's not going anywhere. And that the what you as a human are bringing to your role in order to fulfill that ultimate outcome is going to change as the tools change, but it probably shifts towards alignment and supervision. That's what I observe. And that's what we observe in our team, that now you have a system that's running autonomously and now you need people to be supervising it all the time. And can it work at way more scale? Yeah, sure. The bandwidth might be 10x, but now you need supervisors who are trained in that particular. So
then what does a 10x legal team look like in 5 years, you think?
In-house legal team?
Yeah.
I think a 10x in-house legal team in 5 or 10 years, for me, it's critical that before you can automate anything and before you can even understand how a 10x legal team looks, you have to understand the lay of the land. You have to have a map of the territory. And one of the things that no doubt you're seeing at Stella, as you're seeing all of these enterprises and helping them with their implementations across many different kind of software verticals, is that many of these teams don't even know where their query ingress is, where are all the queries arising from, what's their biggest bottleneck, where are they losing most money. This is why maybe the most critical aspect of any like procurement process right now is that upfront legal ops consultancy or legal ops, whether it's done by yourselves or whether it's done by external support or whatever. And the way we think about it at Flank, I know I'm giving like roundabout answers because I'm trying to give the big picture here, but is that all of these requests are coming in from all over the business and they have to land somewhere. And if you can ensure that everything is landing in one place and that it's seeing it from every single jurisdiction and every tool and it's all coming in and you have one single central inbox, you can then decide what category of work do you want to send away for automation. So this is a long way of saying how I envision like the legal team of the future in 5 years is that they have a single front door where everything lands from every single fragmented channel. They have a clear playbook of whether this goes to Michelle, whether this goes to Darren, or whether this goes to agent X, Y, Z. That just flows through into the right place. If it flows to a human member of the legal team, that the triage has been done, a summary, a risk assessment, everything else is done up front. And then that human, when they do pick up the work, has the tooling like Claude Cowork, where they can grab this and with an agent that is very context rich, has access to all of these different systems, can then easily get that work done in a way that is consistent and high quality. And for the agents who are doing it, they have the same access to all that context. They pump it in back to the team for supervision. And then they're working much more like just chewing through a backlog. And what this allows that team to do is then zoom back a little bit, look at the lay of the land. Where are we pushing back on particular provisions all the time? Where are we getting pushbacks on our own all the time? How do we improve our contractual positions? How do we lower the risk? And these teams become much more strategic in their ability to dial in how the legal team operates. Mm-hmm. If we're talking 5 years, it could be probably more ambitious than that, but that's really the direction I see things going in.
Yeah, no. And I think maybe just a few more questions. If Flank works exactly how you plan it to work, what changes in the world?
Wow, what changes in the world? I think ultimately the cost of external legal services will have to collapse. So specifically looking at ALSPs, traditional ALSPs, the factors of the world, I think their margins are already thin. And I think if we execute on our value proposition the way that we believe we can, then you're looking at a service that costs half of what an ALSP would cost with better quality, more consistency, and vastly superior SLAs. And it's all under your roof, under your guidance, it's the dream scenario, the way that if you have a great LSP you love, you bring them in-house, it's the dream scenario. And then I think that collapses LSP, the LSP market. I think it disrupts the LSP market. More broadly, I think that's a signal towards external counsel spend full stop. There'll then be a much greater interrogation of, hold on a minute, if routine work now costs a lot less and is way better, why are law firms still charging us whatever for this work? Even if it's a bit more complex, I should not be spending that. And then what I want to see is two things. I want to see that panel each year offering discounts, not an increase. I want to see them saying, okay, we're 5% or 10% cheaper. And I want to see a new seat at that table of a law firm that is either new or has entirely disrupted itself and runs on agents with human supervisors in the loop. And they come in and they say, well, we're going to charge 50% less than all of you guys. So you do what you want, but we're going to keep the standard exceptionally high and we're going to charge 50% less. And then everyone who has a seat at that panel is panicking And that's the disruption. So if Flank is working how I would love to see it work in the coming months, then that is what I would expect to see in the world.
What if it doesn't work? What's still worth doing?
So what if it doesn't work? To what extent? So
we can never, and I think you and I and Lily, we've all talked for a long time, right? We all want to crack that outcome-based pricing, disrupt the market. We're all standing in disbelief that even today you've got all these tools that make you more efficient, be able to deliver at lower costs, but end clients are just not seeing those results. Therefore, that market isn't being disrupted right now. What if that doesn't work? What is still worth doing?
So without selling a vision that isn't what we're doing, without implying anything too great, I think it is absolutely still worth. Look, if an agentic service, so if a software provider, an AI vendor cannot deliver on the value proposition through that channel of software, so delivering services software, this is this whole new thing that is being talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can still, and we see this today, so it's still worth doing, it can still have an enormous material impact on the ability of a service, an existing traditional legal service, to deliver its legal service. So on the 29th of this month, we're going to be traveling to a European city to spend time with a small alternative legal service provider, 30 to 50 lawyers, I think, and doing some co-design, co-development of product with them. It is still worth trying to disrupt the broader, bigger legal ecosystem by doing it all yourself, full stack, end to end, everything, full shebang with lawyers. Mm-hmm. And even if that means that a lot of your gains are not coming from your own AI software innovation, but rather from leveraging from the ground up at every single layer, the best agentic technology you can, and operating in an AI native way, like we see General Legal and Crosby and these people do, I think that's still worth doing. And I think that market is so enormous and there's nowhere near enough people moving into that market already.
Yeah. So we've got Interstella coming up, which I think is something that, I think even we chatted about it with you guys in the very, very beginning of thinking about it a few years ago. What are you looking forward to? I know you're playing there. You guys are speaking. Yeah. What are you looking forward to about Interstella?
So I think the main thing I want to see and that I want to be part of is this is a new event. There are a lot of very open-minded people at the event, people who are working at the bleeding edge, who are seeing disruption firsthand, who are implementing disruptive technologies and services firsthand. I really want to see those examples of the bleeding edge get normalized for rather than for us to look at it as innovation and for us to look at it as enormous transformation. This technology, these services, they're so ready to pick up and adopt right now. And people who make it much easier, like there are partners of ours who we're working with, there's agentic services, AI native law firms, whatever, who you can just engage and then they take care of everything. You don't even need to think about adopting technology. There's still a degree of fear, and I want to flip that, normalize it, and for it to just look like this amazing opportunity that is ready right now. It's not, we don't have to sit around and we don't have to mingle and be talking about what might be possible in 6 months' time at Interstella. We can go, okay, off the back of Interstella, of all the people I've met who have implemented stuff, who are thinking of implementing stuff, who are building this, who are delivering services, what am I now going to do? Like tomorrow, as soon as I get back on whatever day is going to be, Monday, Tuesday, as soon as I sit down at my desk, who can I call? What can I do with my team? Rather than it being just another event where you meet 100 vendors and you get 100 numbers and then they all email you after. Like, it won't be like that. I'm very, very confident. So it's this open communication where people the walls kind of come down a little bit and the performance comes off a little bit. And we meet in that room as humans, all interested in the same stuff, which is there's crazy AI and agentic stuff going on right now. How do we actually move into the future with that rather than just get like hounded by people trying to sell me something?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, I mean, you touched on it very beautifully in terms of what we're aiming to achieve in those 2 days.
So I think it's certainly overestimating legal intelligence platforms. I think the degree to which something like Claude Cowork can replicate the work of a legal intelligence platform is hugely underestimated. And therefore, these tools themselves are overestimated. They're very, 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 very thin wrappers over some basic prompts, which is not to say there's not value, but that's just, I think that is not fully understood. And then what has been underestimated unquestionably is the power of these new services that are coming up. AI native services, agentic services, all of these. Again, I'll name people like General Legal and Crosby. And TBD about Udia. Obviously, they're working with huge companies, so it's hard to see necessarily what they're doing. In the mid-market, you get a lot more exposure, I think. You get to see a lot more what people working in the mid-market are actually doing. Enterprise are it's a little bit harder to see. So I think what is possible already today, if you just pick up the phone or email one of these providers, I think is enormously underestimated. I think you'll see incredible turnaround times in the SLAs. I think you'll see really consistent outputs on routine work like NDA review, MSA review, whatever. And I think you'll see new kinds of services that can be delivered thanks to this amazing kind of agentic AI. You might be able to see work that previously, like an enormous A process that previously would have cost you 50K. We've had to spend that on our own fundraising processes for the legal side of things. I think you'll see that can be collapsed to under 10K and can surface new insights that previously just weren't possible. I think that's been massively underestimated. And then a freebie, I think is overestimated is vibe coding, but that's a whole, like, lawyers vibe coding is this whole topic that I think needs a dedicated podcast. I think a good frame for legal AI adoption that helps see past the existing tool market that is very noisy is this single problem statement. So inexpensive work, routine work is done by very expensive, highly trained resources. That is, for me, the crux of the whole problem with legal right now. Where do you see that in your organization? If you're observing anywhere in your organization, even outside of legal, where you have a really highly qualified, highly trained, expensive person doing routine, inexpensive work, that is a problem. So you might be paying £100 an hour for like emails to be routed to the right person or something crazy. That's a much saner way of looking at how you might spend money on AI than to say, what's the coolest legal intelligence platform? Because that legal intelligence platform will not solve your problem. Instead, your expensive resources now have an expensive tool to use as well. So I would encourage people to look at things in that way and see what comes out. I can't wait. Yeah, it's been amazing. Thanks, Tice.